Welcome to episode 159 of the CUInsight Experience. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and this show is all about taking a deep dive with the leaders from around the credit union movement that make it so great, and sometimes from some folks outside the credit union movement, which today happens to be. This episode is brought to you by our friends at CUIs, the credit union industry's leading talent development solutions provider. After listening to our show, learn more about and register for CEO Dialogue by visiting CUIs.org to join your fellow CEOs in an open discussion tackling the industry's most pressing issues. Today, I am having a conversation with Brittany Hodak. Brittany is an award-winning entrepreneur, author, customer experience speaker who has delivered keynotes across the globe. She has worked with some of the world's biggest brands and entertainers, including Walmart, Disney, Katy Perry, and Dolly Parton. She founded and scaled an entertainment startup to 8 figures before exiting, and she is the former chief experience officer at experience.com. Forbes said of her debut book, Creating Superfans, which I suggest everybody go pick up, if you have customers, you need this book, period. And with that, let's jump right in. Brittany, welcome to the show. I must say, doing a little homework for the show has me really excited for our conversation. I can't wait also for you to be the next keynote at the CUInsight Mini-Con event coming up. Welcome to.
Thanks so much for having me, Randy. I am so excited to be on the podcast and even more thrilled that I get to do the keynote with you guys soon.
Oh, it's going to be fun. That's for sure. And I think people are going to really dig what you talk about. So I'm excited to kind of dig into that some here today as well. But to start, could you give us a little bit about your story? It seems like it's a pretty interesting one out there. How'd the career start and how did that lead you to where you are today?
Well, I took a very winding path to customer experience, which is a passion of mine. I started out working in the entertainment industry. I always knew I wanted to work in the entertainment industry from the time I was a tiny, tiny kid. When I was 16, I got a job at a radio station in my hometown. I was the mascot. I was Sting the Bee. I got to dress up in costumes and go to every car dealership sale and furniture store grand opening. I thought it was the coolest job in the world because of my proximity to all of my radio heroes. And I had the very, very good fortune about 6 months after I started that job that because my maiden name was Brittany Jones, our station manager had thought of me when she saw an ad for the movie Bridget Jones' Diary. Yep. And she was like, oh, this Bridget Jones' Diary movie is coming out. We have a Brittany Jones. We should do something. And mind you, no one on the planet knew they had a Brittany Jones. I wore a bee suit, but I was like, yeah, we should totally do something. And she said, what could we do and call it your diary? And I said, well, you're always trying to get more people to the radio station website. What if I just kind of wrote concert reviews or interviewed bands when they came to town? And, that could be my diary and we could just tell people, go read about the behind the scenes on the website. And she said, oh, that other movie, that Almost Famous movie. Yeah. Everyone's talking movie, about that. Oh my gosh. So good. And this was right before it came out. And so she was like, yeah, let's just do that. Just make a list of all the bands you want to see. We'll set everything up with the record labels and don't forget to write the time on your time card. And I was like, you're going to pay me to hang out with rock stars and brag about it on the internet. Did that just become my job?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I was 17. And so, that kind of spoiled any chances of me ever getting a real job because I discovered this world where you could just do the most amazing, ridiculous things and get paid for it. So I met everyone I could, talked to everyone I could, leveraged all of those new connections so that I could intern at record labels when I was in college. Then after I graduated college, I moved to New York. I worked at 2 of the major record labels, Sony and Warner. And after that, went to work in an entertainment agency where I was working with big brands that were sponsoring tours and licensing music for TV and commercials and things like that. So doing all of these really fun things. But what I was always really obsessed with was trying to figure out how to better connect the fans with the artists. And of course, this was like when I started out, it was pre iTunes. And then, a huge chunk of my music career was pre Spotify. And so I was always like trying to figure out how to do a better job of helping people get a glimpse into these like incredible experiences that I always got to have. Because I was like, I am so fortunate. I get to like go on the tour bus and hang out and like go to dinner and have conversations with these heroes of mine. Other people don't have that. So I was always trying to figure out ways to create more of a connection. So when I was like 26, I think, I launched a company called Zine Pack, where I was making these like magazine packages that were essentially deluxe editions of albums. So it was, if you really love this band, you should get this like coffee table style book edition that's got all these exclusive interviews and photos that you can't get anywhere else and like merch items. And so I partnered with Walmart, who was my big first client.
You had the merch store before the YouTube kids did? That's amazing.
I did, yeah. It was, I made, I need to like count up how many. It was probably about 100 exclusive, like VIP fan packages for Walmart, for like everybody in the world. I mean, we worked with Taylor Swift and Dolly Parton and Katy Perry and the Beach Boys and just Justin Bieber, like everyone, you name it. If it was a frontline release, Walmart and meaning me, the company I started, worked together with the record labels and the artists to make these really fun packages. And so I was so obsessed with the customer experience, like trying to create something that everybody would want to buy. And I also became obsessed with what made people fans, like what made you connect with some artists, because there were some artists that labels would come to us and say, like, we want to do one of these packages. And I would say, I don't think it's going to be successful. And not to like, I mean, I won't name any artists because that would be me, but I was like, I just really don't think that anyone is clamoring for a collectible like of that artist. And some of them were very well known, like, very popular artists who've had long careers. And I was like, I just don't think that people care. And so I started to really dive into the consumer behavior, like the psychology behind why do some artists have like these rabid fan bases while others, their fans are just like, meh, like it's, it's more apathy. And like maybe they'll buy something or maybe they won't, but like it's filler. It's not part of the fabric of, their lives and their personalities and their stories. And the interesting thing about fandom is that I saw it across all ages. Like one day, probably like a year or so into launching the company, on the same day, there were collectible projects that came out for Justin Bieber and the Beach Boys.
Right.
And I remember those Beach Boys fans were like way crazier than the Bieber fans. And this was in 2012. So it was like a 50th anniversary Beach Boys project. And, Bieber at the height of,
mania. Yeah.
Bieber fever. Yeah. So that was sort of like this aha moment of like, oh, this is something that cuts across all ages, all genders, all genres. And so I became really fascinated by like the psychology behind fandom. And as we started to work with more and more artists, we started to work with a lot of their brand partners. So all of a sudden we were working with all these CPG companies because, everybody wants to sell more stuff at Walmart. And so it was all of a sudden like, oh yeah, we're working with Taylor, but we're also working with CoverGirl and we're also working with Diet Coke and we're working with American Greetings and like all of her partners. So as I started to really dig into, well, why would someone be a fan of this cosmetics line? Why would someone be a fan of, this beverage company? And to look at the behavior, I started to see all of these patterns. And the biggest pattern that was emerging was that super fans are created when your story and theirs intersect in some way. You're overpowering that apathy because you're connecting your thing to their life. Like you're becoming relevant to someone in a way that gets their attention and makes them say, oh, I get it. Like I should care about this thing because. So that sort of drove me to like want to learn more about that. I went back to school, got a master's degree in consumer behavior, and accidentally became this customer advocate for people to, be more customer centric in all their decision making.
We're glad you did because we get to pick your brain on this one. You mentioned Superfans. Your book is titled Creating Superfans. You also have a podcast by the same name. Very nice branding. You mentioned what a superfan is. How do we, whether it's if you're a Taylor Swift or if you're a credit union out there, how do we create more super fans, I guess. And I have to, this is something that was in my head. People at CUInsight have heard me say this so many times, since, myself and David founded the company 15 years ago now. It was like that I'm sure you know it, the Kevin Kelly blog post, 1,000 True Fans from like 2008. Like, I'm always like, when we're building something, whether it was the podcast or whether it was CUInsight, like, where are 1,000 true fans? So when I was reading about your super fans, I kept thinking about these true fans, but they sound like this is even more engaged, right? So if you could, like, who are they? How do we find them? How do we get more of them, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I love that blog post. And there's a quote in my book from Brian Chesky, who's one of the co-founders of Airbnb, who said, if you want to be successful, don't try to build something 1 million people kind of like. Build something that 100 people love. And if you do that, you will be successful. And, we're living right now in an experience economy. People no longer buy just products or services. It's the experience that those products or services are wrapped in. And everyone wants to feel important. Nobody wants to feel like just another number, just another account, just another customer. So to be able to go into an environment where it's, I'm a member here and I matter and the people here know my name and they treat me well and I'm a part of something, automatically gives credit unions a leg up over other financial institutions. And the ones who really focus on this idea of creating not just members, but super fans who are going to refer others is a really fun challenge. And, to kind of answer your question, I define a super fan as a customer or a stakeholder who has such a great experience with your brand that they become an enthusiastic advocate. Meaning not only are they talking about you, but they want to do it. They're proactively saying, I'm going to share about this on social media. Or when I hear somebody talking about something that's even tangentially connected, I'm going to, want to jump in and say, oh, you're moving? Well, hey, like, you got to check out this credit union because I love it. And, they're amazing. So that's kind of the definition. And the really cool thing about superfans and a way to think about them is that they are the customers who create more customers. So if you focus on turning your customers or your members into superfans, they are going to continuously bring you not just leads, but very well qualified leads who now don't want to work with somebody in your space. They want to work with you because they've already heard from a trusted source that you are the best.
That's an interesting thing. I think many times, almost human nature, we may focus more on the squeaky wheel or the one who maybe isn't even close to being a super fan, the unhappy one. But the people that love us, we're like, they're happy. Let's go focus on how do we get this person to be happy. So would you, in that, do you recommend spending more time with your super fans? I mean, making sure that they're even more super, I guess?
100%. And what I would say is, well, let me back up a little bit. I believe that there's only 3 types of outcomes for any interaction that businesses have with their clients, or in this case, their members. Only 3, whether it's online, whether it's on an app, when it's on the phone, whether it's in person. Your customer will leave that interaction with your company, with your technology, with one of your associates, feeling one of 3 ways: better, worse, or exactly the same. That's it. Every single interaction that a member has with your credit union will leave them better, worse, or exactly the same as they started out. And many companies are comfortable with that neutral space, that like nothing burger of an experience that immediately is like gone from the customer's mind. Right? They're focused on eliminating the negative experiences, getting rid of the frustrations and the annoyances. And while that's certainly important, and you should, of course, try to eliminate those friction points, what it means when you're living in that like net neutral space is that you're forgettable. Like, it's just filler. It's like the bands and you hear a song on the radio and you're like, it's fine because I've got a 45-minute drive, but like, I don't care enough to listen to them on Spotify. I don't care enough to say, who is the spy? Let me listen to more of their music. It just like passes the time. So if you can train your team to find the opportunities to trade those neutral moments for net positive experiences, doing something that's going to bring a smile to their face, that's going to interrupt that apathy, that's going to make them say, wow, that was great. Even if it's something as simple as paying them a compliment, giving a dog treat to their dog when they're in the drive-thru, handing a lollipop to their kid or a sticker. Like, these things don't have to cost a lot of money or take a lot of time. You just have to create a culture in which you say, our goal is to leave every one of our customers or members a little bit better than we found them.
It's such an interesting thing because a lot of the conversation around credit unions, like at all the events the last couple of years, and I would say even on the podcast, has to do with like our relevance, right? Like staying relevant in financial services there are a lot of non-even bank players that are now competitors, whether it's Apple or Google Pay or, whatever it happens to be, all the fintech companies. So it's that idea of not just like hanging our hat on, oh, well, we provide great service or we provide the best rates. That to me doesn't seem like it makes a super fan anymore. And something that I think that you said that was so important that maybe we need to hear is like creating that good experience, not just if they walk in the branch, but if it's online. I have not been in a credit union branch in probably 5 years. So it's, my entire experience is digital, right? Like, so I guess thoughts there on maybe how focusing more on the super fans can help us stay relevant in the credit unions community.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing is making sure that your members feel valued, that they know that you're so happy to have them as part of the family, not assuming that, but making it a point to tell them, whether that's online or in real life, making sure that they feel that value. And you're right. People are having more and more of their interactions and their experiences digitally. So you've got to remove friction. Like, having great technology is not a nice differentiator. It is a must have. It is like, that is the table stakes if you want to have customers. But even within the digital experiences, there are ways to showcase your uniqueness, to showcase your brand, right? Like, what is that confirmation message they get when they upload that check? Does it just say like, okay, we got it? Or is it something that feels a little bit more special? How are they greeted when they open your app? How easy are you making it for them to call and talk to a human when they need to talk to a human? Is it one tap or is it 7 taps? And then when they do call, are you having to put 15 rounds of information in, or have you, built out the technology to say, we recognize your phone number? Are you calling about your, checking or your savings? So there are absolutely things that you can do. I think
Delta needs to hire you recently.
Yes. Well, so it's funny that you mentioned airlines, because that, very much like credit unions, that's another market that traditionally has been thought of as a commodity market. Right? Yeah, like what you were saying before, like people are, like, oh, what are my rates? Or how close is this location to my house? Or will you give me the loan that I need? And those are not it's like what got us here will not take us into the future.
I agree.
Like, we are now in an experience economy where the way people feel and their perception of how you care about them is the most important thing, not only for keeping their business, but also what they are going to say about you when given the opportunity.
It's such an interesting thing you say there, because like as somebody who travels a lot, I'm thinking about my airline experience right now instead of credit unions. Sorry, credit union folks, but like that idea. I mean, not only, I want to say just a commodity, but like it is very easy to find an alternative choice today. In anything, right? Like we can just do a quick Google search and we can find something else if we're unhappy with it. And to the superfan side, it's also very easy to share our pleasure or displeasure today with a lot of people. So
100%. And like the convergence of those two things is why this concept is so important for people to understand, because you're right. It has never been easier for someone to share their opinion. We have a global audience like in our pockets. Every customer is an influencer. Every single person has people in their immediate sphere of influence who will make a decision based solely on something that person screen says. So it's very important to realize that every customer is an influencer.
I love that line. That is fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so true, right? And the other thing of what you said is also so true. It has never been easier to find an alternative. And that is why apathy is so dangerous. Because if you're not making someone care enough to come back, then they're not gonna. And obviously, if somebody has an account with you, like maybe they'll keep that account for a little while, but what happens when they want a loan? What happens when they, come into more money? They get an inheritance. They get like whatever it is. You're obviously competing for more wallet share. And if you haven't done a good enough job, then they're going to be like, oh, I keep seeing ads for this like online savings account that's telling me the interest is like 4% now just for a, checking account online. That's cool. I can sign up in an app in 5 seconds. Like that is the competition, along with, as you mentioned, like the Apple Pays of the world, I'm going to just like put some money under my mattress of the world. I mean, this is probably an outdated stat, but I remember when I was working with Walmart back in the day, one of the things that we were always conscious of is they said like some huge percentage of their shoppers did not have any kind of bank account at all.
Absolutely.
And it was like 45 or 50%. Just, they were like, oh, there's no account anywhere. And so you've also like got that contingent.
But Walmart made it very easy to cash checks, right? And things like that there, because then they'd know you'd spend the money there.
Yeah. And they have what's it called? Like Bluebird or something.
Right. They did their own banking. Just to try to get the people.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you that I'm excited to ask you. There's a lot of CEOs that listen to this podcast that run credit unions. If they're sitting there and they're having these kind of like light bulb aha moments, like people can't see me, but you can, where I'm going, oh, what? Yeah, okay.
He's making a light bulb over his head.
Right, over my head. It's not the air quotes, it's a literal light bulb. But what should leaders be doing, or maybe what questions should we be asking to make sure that, like, as an organization, right, from top down, we are creating more superfans?
Well, Randy, I'm so glad you asked. And what I will say to you, Mrs. or Mr. CEO, you got to make sure you come to the webinar that we're doing together, because I am going to walk you through my 5-part framework, which I share in my book, Creating Superfans. It's the 5 steps that you can follow to create superfans. A couple things I'll say to you now, though, just to help you get a jump start, is number 1, you have to define what it is about you that makes you deserving of superfans. Like, why should someone care? If somebody said to you, why are you different than everybody else? You damn sure better have a good answer that's not like, well, you're here right now, so we're the closest and our rates are pretty good. So like, there's that, because those things don't matter. Like, you do not get a warm, fuzzy feeling about rates or proximity,
right.
or maybe you do, but like most people don't. So that's number 1, is like getting laser focused on your uniqueness. What is your superpower? I was flying last night. We were talking about airplanes. I was flying home from Denver late last night because I spoke yesterday to an audience in, I don't know, Scottsdale or Tempe or somewhere. And I was in Phoenix. And do you know what the Phoenix airport calls itself? I didn't know this. Well, I mean, I think the name is like Sky Harbor Airport or something,
right,
but
yeah.
All of the signs say, welcome to Phoenix, the world's friendliest airport. And everywhere, like everywhere in the terminal, like world's friendliest airport, world's friendliest airport, world's friendliest airport. So they decided that they're going to put a stake in the ground and claim we're the world's friendliest airport. That then informs the way they interview for, hire, train, perhaps compensate around the behavior of all of their employees, because there is now an expectation. We are the world's friendliest airport, right? So if you want to create superfan members, you must first start by having superfan employees, because never, ever, ever in the history of the world has an apathetic employee led to an engaged customer. It does not happen. It cannot happen. So, Mrs. or Mr. CEO, what I would say to you is, number 1, get laser focused on what it is that you are or want to be the best in the world at. Then create a plan that allows you not just to communicate that internally to your team, but to empower and enable them around being able to like fulfill that promise to your members. Train them, give them all of the tools that they need, teach them why it's important to embody that, to be that, to do that. And then you can start telling your customers. Only once you've said, this is what it is from like top down and bottom up. This is who we are. This is why it matters. Now let's go tell the world 1, 2, 3 break.
Okay. So 2 things. I just had a million questions and I could go down so many rabbit holes here, but I can't. Time. People just have to come to Mini-Con and then buy your book and
you can get it now.
All these things.
Wherever books are sold. Creating Superfans.
There it is. We will link to that in the show notes for sure and give some away. I think it's the Mini-Con event. So I guess 2 things there. If we're, again, back to the, from the organizational level, I guess, is there a way to measure this? Often we get stuck in metrics, right? And many times they're short term. So if we're trying to create long-term, I will just say Superfans, what's the value? I think back to earlier into my career. I worked for an investment company where you had to make a certain amount of calls to clients, and they measured if you hit all these things in each call was considered a good call, not if you actually created a relationship, right? So if you hit them all in 1 minute, or if you were on the phone for a half hour creating the relationship, the 1 minute call was actually a better call. So I kind of think about that when we're talking about this. How do we create that culture, but also measure it so that it is like, if we tell people this is what we want to be, but then we measure them on something short term, where's the focus going to be if that's their job, right?
Yes. I am so glad that you asked about this. So there's a quote that I love from Albert Einstein. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. And I think he was talking about Instagram when he said that, but it is applicable across a lot of different areas. So yes, this is a mistake that so many people make, especially with their frontline employees or their call center employees, because they're incentivizing the wrong types of behavior based on exactly what you said. It's easy to look at a, dashboard and say, this was the average call time, or, this is how many clicks it took. And so you start to focus on those things. But as Mr. Einstein said, when he was talking about reels, like it doesn't count just because you can count it. Like it doesn't matter. So, a few things. Number 1, there is a lot of evidence that has shown again and again that focusing on customer experience is very profitable. There is an ROI. There was a study that was done that looked at the S&P 500 and divided companies into 3 categories: the sort of standard, normal, what I would call net neutral customer experiences, the leaders, and the laggards. And they saw over a period of 15 years that the companies that were known for and talked about their customer experience outperformed the baseline by about 120 points, which is significant, right? And the laggards were almost exactly inversely true. It was like 115 points below the baseline, like the performance of the S&P for those like normal companies. So there is an ROI. Also, there's sort of the evolution of NPS from the same team that came up with NPS is now something called earned growth rate, or EGR. And it's a formula that credit unions can use to look at the impact of CX over time. And essentially you're looking at the ratio of business that comes from existing customers and customers who were referred by existing customers compared to your overall revenue. Because we know saying, oh, we've got, $1 million to make the math easy. Like, oh, we had $1 million of accounts this month. You would much rather have $1 million growth from your existing customers than to have had $1 million that you lost, but 2 million more that came in for a net, growth of $1 million. Like retention matters, growth matters. It's like, I remember when I was a kid, there was the song that was like, make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other gold, something like that. Do you remember that?
Awesome.
It's like some silly, it's like, there's such an emphasis on customer acquisition often at the detriment of customer retention, which is so silly, but it's because siloed companies over, a period of generations have incentivized sales over service, because you have people who are like, I make so much more money on customer acquisition than I do on retention. And of course, it's very short-sighted. We know that it is 6 to 7 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than it is to sell something else to an existing customer or member in this, using the terminology for credit unions. So yes, absolutely. You can track customer experience. You can track the impact of it. You can track the ROI over time. You just have to make sure that you're measuring the things that matter, like retention, like growth, like people who are referred by an existing member. So if you're not tracking that right now, if you're not asking every new prospect and customer, how did you hear about us? Not only so that you know it, but also so that then you can close that loop and thank the member who referred their friend or their family member, saying, hey, thank you so much for sending Susie our way. We're so thrilled to welcome her to the family and we appreciate it. That is something that you should immediately do and train your people to do, so that you know where those new customers are coming from. And also so that you can, like I said, close the loop and make sure that you're saying to somebody, hey, thank you so much for sending somebody from your network. We are going to give them like the, red carpet, velvet rope treatment.
I love that. Something I did want to ask you. You not only led your own company, from startup to exit, which is a beautiful thing as a small business owner. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yes, it was fun.
But you've worked with a lot of leaders as well. In 2023, I've kind of been saying this on the podcast a lot. A lot of the books that you and I probably grew up on reading about leadership seem pretty dated today, right? Like as far as the people side of the business goes. What does it take to make a great CEO today, or a great leader in general today, in your opinion, with all the folks you work with?
I love this question. Number one, I would say vision. So one of my favorite newsletters that I read every morning is called The Hustle. And it's great. If you don't get it, you should sign up for it. It's so great. And a few weeks ago, they had a study where somebody had looked at, could AI replace CEOs? Because they were, did you see this?
I did not see that, but all the questions about what AI could replace is just fascinating to me.
Right.
Now,
yeah.
right?
Like they're like, we always talk about like lower skilled jobs or, now like creator economies with, the advent of some of the Chat GPT-4 stuff that's happening in the artistic ones. So they were like, but like, what about CEOs? Like, would companies operate just as well or better if AI replaced CEOs? And so they ran an analysis that basically said like in 40% of companies, there would be no difference. And the savings would be like millions and millions of dollars a year compared to replacing a bunch of people who are making $38,000 a year or whatever. So anyway, and the point of that was that like so many CEOs aren't doing the things that AI cannot replace. The vision casting, the people side saying, this is what we're doing. So I would say the most important qualities in a CEO, regardless of the size or age of your organization, number one is being that figurehead, saying, this is the game that we're trying to win. Like we're not, gonna get caught up on all this other stuff. We exist for this purpose. We are in alignment as a team to further this goal for our members. So to like cast that vision, and then to be not a manager, but a leader, right? Because people don't want to be managed. Like you said, like all those books are like, did not age well, right? They aged about as well as Kevin Spacey. Like awesome. It is, like it is about casting that vision, making the tough decisions and doing it in a way that is decisive, because also, the world we're living now is so complex and like nuanced and immediate. And as a leader, you are going to have to make decisions of like, do we say something about this social issue or do we not? Like, do we take a stance on this thing that's happening and impacting our community or, our team members or our members, or do we not? And so you've got to be in a position to decisively say yes or no based on not like the direction of the wind, but the vision that you've cast for the company, what your core values are, what you stand for, and the company that you want to be known for leading.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting time. That's for sure. You saying that about the CEO, I hadn't seen that one, but I was reading an article about ChatGPT and, just the AI in general and attorneys. They were like, so much of the work that you would normally have to hire an attorney for could be easily replaced already, right? Not arguing something in court, but like writing a business document or a will or whatever, happens to be. Right. It's like, it's a fascinating thing to see how this is going to all play out, and kind of exciting. I want to be respectful of your time before we get into have a little bit of fun with some rapid fire questions at the end here. Was there anything that you hoped I was going to ask you about that I didn't, that you'd like to get out into the world here?
No, I love the conversation that we've had. The one thing that I'll say is for CEOs, and I'm sure they know this, but you've kind of got the two-pronged approach of when I talk about overpowering apathy, because, and I don't have the statistics, but I would assume that there are quite a few consumers who don't really understand what a credit union is. Like, they don't know if it's something that they can participate in. Maybe they're like, oh yeah, I think my grandma had that because she was a teacher, but I'm not a teacher, or, whatever. So you've sort of got these two-pronged layers. The first level of apathy is what we are as a category. And the second layer is how my institution is different from all of the other credit unions. So I've got to tell you how I'm different from a bank, but then I've also got to tell you how I'm different from all these other credit unions.
That's a great point. I grew up in, people have probably heard it on the podcast, I grew up in Metro Detroit for my first 30 years of life. And most people, and I heard it often that, you had to belong to the auto workers union to be in a credit union, right? It was just this kind of assumption, right? And it was like, no, that's not true. So you are right. We do have to define who we are first. That is amazing. So I'd like to, we do some rapid fire questions on the show. The questions are rapid. Your answers don't have to be. To kick it off, when was the last time, either personally or professionally, you were amazed?
Wow, what a great question. It's hard for me to be amazed because, I talk about customer experience for a living. But I will say one thing that really amazed me was, so I'm remodeling my downstairs bathroom, and I had a gentleman here to do all the plumbing work earlier this week. And he noticed that I had two boys running around, and not only was very kind to them and very sort of oh, do you want to help me? Here, you can help me pull the sink out or whatever. But he said to me, did you know that they make floating targets that you can put in the toilet to help the boys cave? And I was like, that is the most amazing thing I've ever heard of. No, I did not know that. And as the mom of two young boys, I immediately bought them on Amazon. And I was so excited that he shared that knowledge. And he was like, oh yeah, I always like to tell anybody who has little boys, because I wish that this had existed when my boys were young, because it would have saved us a lot of cleaning up at the bathroom.
We have a tween in our house that we're probably going to be getting those. Jill's listening. She'll be ordering those instantly, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I got dinosaur ones and I got monster truck ones, and they're really thin. It's it's like tissue paper, but it's a thing. And for the older kids, they actually have the ones that are points. It's an actual target. And it's how many points did you get for peeing on the thing? And then it just dissolves like toilet paper. So that was something that I appreciated. And it doesn't, that's amazement doesn't always have to be some big, crazy, complex thing. It's hey, did you know about this thing that exists?
That is amazing. What's taking up that self-growth space for you personally? What are you working on?
I am really, I'm in a new stage in my career because my book came out in January. I am speaking so much more than I have in past years. I think I'm up to almost 50 in-person speaking engagements this year. So it is a lot of travel.
Wait, now this sounds like you've overbooked. On your website, it says you do 35 max in person.
I know. Well, because in the past, that was never, it was 35. And I think I even in my book was oh, I'm going to up it to maybe 40. But this year, and it's funny because I said to my husband, we got to talk about how many I'm going to do. And he was keep doing them. It's great.
Okay.
You love it. So, but I think I did 9 in-person things in February. And in March, I had, it was about the same. It was 8 or 9 plus a bunch of virtual stuff. So one thing that I've been working on is being better with my time management. And also this idea, this is a mantra from Marie Forleo, who has a course called Time Genius. She said that something that was transformative to her is the mantra, I don't do overwhelm. Because when you feel overwhelmed as a person, it's typically because you're not focused on the moment. You're stressed about like what you didn't get done, or you're thinking like, oh, I've got to like go do this thing later. You're not in the moment. So every time she feels overwhelmed, she says to herself, I don't do overwhelm. Like, I'm not going to let myself focus on like something from before or after, because we're in right here, right now. And as simple and silly as it sounds, it has like really changed my relationship with time. So every time I find myself stressed about something later, I'm like, I don't do overwhelm, and I just deal with it. And yeah.
I love that. It's learning to say no to stuff is a beautiful thing sometimes too. So you don't get too overwhelmed, right? Like,
exactly. Yeah. Doing a better job protecting your time.
Oh yes, that space is beautiful. And the kind of, this ties into it. You mentioned your husband. You mentioned you have young boys at home, and you mentioned 50 on the road live speaking, experiences. I know we were talking beforehand. The family's coming along for one, when you're around Orlando, and you have to be there, so you can do both. Oftentimes, whether it's us that I think, travel for work, but also like CEOs that have built, you tend not to get to that position without putting your head down and, going for it. And often that's at the detriment of all those personal relationships. Any hacks you've picked up along the way while you're running all over the country to make sure that the home life and work life kind of balance each other out?
Yeah, I've gotten really good at saying no to stuff. Like you said, it's sort of, I think, immediately when you have kids, you sort of realize that like you'd rather be at home with your family than have like 50 coffee meetings that don't matter in a year, right? Like all the things that like when I didn't have kids, or even when I was single, it was like, oh yeah, like let's grab a drink, let's do lunch, let's whatever. And now I'm like, no, I need that 90 minutes to do something that actually matters. There's like a handful of people that I will go meet with in person and spend time with because they're my close friends. But everybody that's like a casual acquaintance, it's like, yeah, no, I'll see you and like 50 other people when we're all in a networking thing or an event. So I think that's one thing, is like getting really clear on like what you say no to. And then also I just try to like have fun with my kids when I'm with them. So trying to like not worry about the work stuff and say like, yeah, mommy was just gone for 2 days, but now I'm home. So like, let's go to Chuck E. Cheese and get a million tickets, or, let's go eat pizza and watch a movie. So trying to like have those fun moments to balance out when I'm away.
You mentioned your book came out. We will link to that for sure, Creating Superfans, in the show notes. Anything else that you're either currently reading, or is there that book that you've either gifted or you just think everyone should read after they're finished with yours?
Well, yes, thank you. Everybody should read mine first. And it's a fun read. It really is. People like my favorite comment from people are like, oh, I thought this was going to be like a business book that was boring, but it's so fun. It's a business book, but like it's printed in color, and the layout is really pretty. And there's a lot of like breaks in it, a lot of pop culture references. So yes, please read Creating Superfans, or get the audiobook, which I narrate. I would say if you have not yet read this, it's like a 2-part recommendation. So a dear friend of mine, Joey Coleman, wrote a book that became a bestseller. It sold like a couple 100,000 units, I think, at this point. It came out like maybe 3 years ago. It's called Never Lose a Customer Again. And it's about the things that you need to do in the first 100 days of a relationship with a new customer to turn them into, he doesn't say this, but to turn them into a super fan. It's an amazing book. It's helped countless organizations. And he has a new book called Never Lose an Employee Again that takes the same approach to what do you need to do in those first 100 days, because it's the other side of the coin. That book is coming out, I think, on June 27th, but you can pre-order it now. And I was lucky enough to read an advance copy, and it is so good. Like, it's one of those that I was going to like skim and be like, oh, Joey, it's great. I read every word of it. Yeah, exactly. I was like, it is so good. There's so much value packed into it. And there are a lot of financial services examples in it. So go read Never Lose a Customer Again by Joey Coleman, and pre-order Never Lose an Employee Again so that you'll have that when it comes out.
After you order Creating
Superfans. Which,
perfect.
You may want to just go ahead and order members of your team copies too. And then you'll all be aligned. You'll all understand my super model, which is that 5-part framework that we're going to talk about when we do the webinar in a few weeks.
That is awesome. All right. 2 last quick questions. I had to ask you this one, even though I'm running short on time here. And this may be a really hard one for you, but favorite album of all time, the one you can listen to front to back.
Oh my gosh, that is so hard.
As a music person, I know picking one might be a tough
picking one
thing.
is so hard. You know what? I'm going to say Sam's Town by The Killers. Underappreciated, but incredibly solid album. And so in my book, I actually use song titles for all of the chapter titles. And there is a little homage in the way that I did them to Sam's Town. So you'll have to pick up my book and then listen to Sam's Town and see if you can find some of the things that I did.
That's fantastic. Last question. Again, just a fun one. Our regulator from the NCUA, when he saw me at an event over the summer, was like, you know what question I'd love to hear you ask people? So who plays you in the movie biopic of your life?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. I don't know. Sometimes people say I look like Zooey Deschanel, so I'll see her.
That is who I was going to say, actually.
Was it? Okay, I was gonna say.
It was 100% like, there have been very few that I'm like, I know who I would pick here for you. That was it. So.
Okay, well, how about you? Who's playing Randy?
Wow. No, I've not answered that before. Maybe a Ben Affleck or something. I think we're about the same age.
Yeah. That is perfect. I can see that. Yeah.
Who knows?
Oh, but he's got a little bit of the angry thing. We're going to have to get Ben
I'm guessing
to smile more.
Maybe go with like one of the
You can have Matt Damon.
Right. Matt Damon or that would be. They seem like they have more fun, and that is true. I don't need to be angry. So, well, we are completely running out of time here. I appreciate so much you being here. If people want to get a hold of you, they have more questions. The website, the best way through the website or LinkedIn, or what's your poison, I guess?
My favorite way for people to get in touch with me is whichever way they prefer, because I am here to make your customer experience as good as possible. But yes, you can find me at BrittanyHodak.com, and I'm Brittany Hodak on pretty much every social platform because thanks to my husband's amazing SEO last name, there aren't a lot of Brittany Hodaks.
That you are lucky with a last name like Smith. That is not the case. So.
Well, and my maiden name was Jones, so I hit the SEO jackpot when I got married. Yeah,
you're like, I'm taking this Hodak.
Yep.
This is awesome. Well, thank you again, Brittany. I can't wait to see you. This is going to come out just a couple of weeks before the actual Mini-Con, so everybody listening will be able to jump on that as well and get more of you. Thank you again. I can't wait for the event that's coming up. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, of course. It's going to be fun, guys. Don't forget to sign up. I'll see you soon.
A few things before we go. Please make sure to check out Q's in the show notes and learn more about and register for their CEO dialogue and be a part of that conversation. Q's has been a longtime partner of CUInsight.com and the podcast, and I'm grateful for their support to allow us all to have this much fun doing what we do. Please also subscribe to the CUInsight Experience and Brittany's Creating Superfans podcast on your favorite podcast player. I know we're both on them all. And if you're looking for Brittany's book or any of the books mentioned on this show, a quick Google of the CUInsight Experience podcast book list, and you can have your next read on its way from Amazon. Last, but certainly not least, I want to thank all of you for listening. Y'all rock. Be well, friends, and talk to you soon.